All right, everybody, welcome to the show. Today we're talking about gym showers, school bungalows, girl fights, and the gum that goes squirt. So before we jump in to all the good stuff we have here on this episode, I did want to mention, Chris, that we got a little bit of a correction from one of the folks that's listening in on the podcast, a person that I used to go to school with, and they corrected us. They said that in the first episode, we talked about the gum that had that liquid center,
right.
that gooey stuff that kind of was supposed to freshen up your breath there. And we accidentally referred to it as Aquafresh, but I've been corrected, Chris. Aquafresh was actually a toothpaste. And it had three things. Remember, it was swirled with three different colors. And
correct.
And that's because, Chris, it was a whitener, a brightener, and a breath freshener. And I'd like to take a moment and reach out to the audience. If you could get back to us and let me know what the difference is between a whitener and a brightener, that would be very helpful. I have no clue how they differentiate.
Apparently, your teeth can be bright without being white. I think they can be bright yellow. I would think maybe.
I feel like we're going back to the lip gloss thing, right? It's moisturizing and it's also making it shiny. I don't know. Somewhere in there is the answer. But the gum that we were specifically talking about, apparently that was called Freshen Up. Freshen Up gum. And as with so many things, Chris, I have all these jingles and theme songs that are permanently stuck in my brain. And so it went something like this on TV. Freshen your breath with Freshen Up. Freshen up. The gum that goes squirt. Love that squirt. I'm not joking. That was the actual.
I'm processing all of it right now. I'm trying to think. Somebody signed off on Love That Squirt for a commercial. I don't know if it makes that on the air this time around.
It was a more innocent time, but that obviously did not stop a lot of my friends from making the obvious middle school, junior high school joke of what the squirt really was.
I think we were really kind of obsessed with freshness overall back in this time because,
yes,
again, and obviously in this day and age, we try to, we don't try to see many commercials, and we try to fast forward through them if they exist at all. But I don't know. I don't know if there's as much emphasis on being fresh and freshening yourself.
That's right.
I think maybe it's implied that we should always be fresh.
Right. That's right.
Anyway,
that's right.
It's good to know we had commercials focusing on freshness.
Back in the 70s, it was, hey, you gross, smelly pig. How about thinking about freshness for a second? Yeah, nowadays it's just sort of implied. And by the way, that is an excellent point about commercials because about 4 years ago when my wife and I decided to finally do away with cable TV, and now we're basically just a streaming family, it was so wonderful to not have to ever see another mother effing commercial ever again. I can't, nowadays, if I happen to be at someone else's house or I'm watching one of those Amazon shows where they're still going to try to sneak a commercial in, I get incensed. I can't even tell you how cranky and grumpy and instantly angry I get if somebody tries to make me watch a commercial.
You mean you don't miss the days of, Mom, do you ever not feel fresh? I mean, that was an actual commercial, but I get your point. I mean, why do you want to watch commercials when you don't have to?
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of our formative years, though, I don't know if I'm the same person I am today without commercials. I'm probably better, but maybe I'm not.
Well, no. And by the way, to be fair, back in the 70s and 80s, a commercial break was about 60 seconds, maybe a minute and a half. They maybe had time for 3 commercials, maybe 4. That was pretty outrageous to have 4 commercials, as opposed to today when they routinely will make you watch 12 to 15 commercials at any given break. So F commercials permanently. I'm out.
Screw it. Stream.
Now, speaking of Freshen Up, though, I realized in looking back at the first few episodes here, Chris, that one of the themes, it didn't even occur to me, is this notion of things getting softer or somehow more pliable.
Right.
And let me explain what I mean. I remember we talked a lot about Levi's blue jeans, right? That started out in the store as starched and impossible to wear. As you pointed out, they stood up by themselves, and you had to wash them about 100 times to get them soft, right?
And if have them fade.
Later on, eventually in the 80s, you could get jeans that were already soft and already dyed or faded, right?
Pre-washed.
And that was a big deal. And then we talked about the boogie board, right? Before that, it was just this piece of styrofoam that would break. It was stiff. And the amazing thing was they got flexible and soft, and that became the thing. Gum, right? Obviously, Bubblicious, Bubble Yum, Freshen Up. Amazing. They now somehow had soft bubble gum. And then finally, we talked about fins, the kind of fins you use in the water, obviously, and they used to be stiff and just made out of hard plastic, and those became flexible, and everybody loved them. And then I think you were mentioning something else, right?
Yeah, the cookies. Food.
Oh yeah, cookies.
I mean, it was and it was like they had, I don't know, soft batch or something like that, because this is supposed to emulate the fact that, oh, these are fresh out of the oven, and it's like, even though they're out of a package, off of a shelf, from a store, produced God knows when, but because they were soft,
right?
And a soft cookie like that was supposed to be good. But at the same time, it's like, but if you got a soft Oreo, that was bad, because that was a stale Oreo.
That's right. Good
right.
point.
You didn't want a soft, chip.
Right.
But hey, if you got these soft cookies made by some freaking elf who lived in a tree, that was supposed to be, they're good. Wow. They're soft.
Okay. Now he's doing a very subtle pull there. That was the Keebler. The Keebler Elves. Yes. Little elves that lived in a tree. That's right. And I remember it kind of blew our minds when we had vending machines where you could get a couple of cookies in a little bag. And you're right. They had somehow now become soft cookies and not hard cookies. By the way, they tasted just as stale, just as shitty, but somehow the softness was something that we all craved, I guess.
Right. So how do you know when the soft cookie is stale? Is it hard then? I mean, I don't know. It goes in the opposite direction.
And could it be that it was just a genius ploy by the manufacturer to say, hey, these are awesome because technically they're stale as hell, but no one's going to know because softness is what we're actually selling here.
Softness,
right?
Softness and freshness. Again, there pulls us right back to, we want to be fresh. We want everything to be fresh.
Well, I guess that's the theme though back then, right? One marketing guy came up with soft gum, and then a bunch of other people caught on and said, hey, we should soften up our product. I think that's what people are looking for. In fact, I would argue that fabric softener became a much bigger thing back in the 80s, right? With Snuggles, the softness bear,
the satanic bear, right? He was just a little bit creepy, but hey, if a bear thinks it's soft, then obviously it's soft. Because when I think of bears, I think of softness, right? Doesn't everybody?
Right. No, of course they're synonymous. Absolutely.
Right.
Now, another thing that you and I were talking about off air, if you will, was back in school. Right. We, of course, talked earlier about the injuries that would take place. Everybody was always injured. Everybody always had a broken this or a broken that. But what led to a lot of injuries was, in fact, the famous school fight. Mm-hmm. Right. And you guys, if you weren't around in the 70s or even the early 80s, you really missed out because, Chris, am I wrong? Was it at least once a week that there was an epic fight that was about to take place?
It seemed like once a week. Maybe there was a rumor of a fight, and maybe there was a recap of a fight that you missed. But either way, you were excited about that fact that somebody was physically fighting over something. Whereas now it would be, obviously, things are much different, and those kind of things are not even tolerated, and people could end up getting thrown. And again, and I'm not trying to minimize anything, but yeah, loved a good school fight.
Well, nowadays it's zero tolerance, and if you're caught being a bully or instigating a fight, allegedly that has serious repercussions. I remember when my son, this would have been in the early 2000s, was going to grade school and middle school and all that. Occasionally you would see some other kid walking towards school, and maybe they're wearing kind of a crazy outfit, or they have purple hair, or they're doing something that back in my day would have definitely set you apart, maybe even set you up for ridicule. And I remember asking my son a couple times, oh man, that kid over there seems like a nice guy, but does he get ridiculed a lot and made fun of? Mm-hmm. And the look on my son's face of, what the hell are you talking about? He literally couldn't even understand why somebody would ever do that to somebody else. I'm like, well, don't you guys have fights that break out, surely? And he's like, huh? What? Fights? Are you serious? Like, I heard of one time, but no, we don't have fights. So, but again, back in our day, it did seem like it was a giant event. Now, guy fights were a different animal altogether, right? Because two guys, that was what? We're going to go meet this afternoon at what, 4:00? I don't know.
Or it was after school.
Yeah.
It was by the bike racks or up on the field, and it was and it was sort of, there had a build up to it, right? And in a sense, and there was a lot of posturing, and again, and maybe it didn't even come off. Maybe it became, I hate to say it, disappointing if you
Right,
really
yeah,
expected
yeah.
if you were expecting to see like a
Yeah.
heavyweight fight or something like that.
Right.
They were, again, sometimes they were good, sometimes they were not, but again, they came up with they had almost like an event like status of
Yeah.
so and so, Jimmy is going to fight John
Right.
after school.
That's
and
right.
boy, you don't want to miss that. Now the opposite of that was the girl fight.
Ooh,
And the girl fights,
Yeah.
and girl fights were much different. In the sense that, number one, they were kind of organic. It's like you didn't know they were going to happen. They were not appointment viewing, to the sense that there's a girl fight up on the field, after school. They would pop up in the hallway in front of the library.
That's right.
Or outside a classroom.
That's right.
So you would crawl across broken glass, or you would run a 100-yard dash in about 5 seconds to get to a girl fight. And there was a couple of reasons on that.
Yeah.
Number one, because of the proximity, because of where they weren't going to last very long. Somebody was going to come along and break up that girl fight. And
So true.
So you want to make sure you didn't miss it. Number two, and again, the girls, there was no posturing. There was no, you start it. No, you start it. No, you start it.
Oh, right.
There was fights with boys had an element of fear. You could tell at least one of the participants didn't really want to do it. Right. And I can remember fights where literally someone would push one of the kids into the other ones to get the fight into the other one to get it actually started. Whereas a girl fight, they got right into it. They were calling names, they were cursing, they were scratching, they were pulling hair. Right? There was a lot more, just sort of, potential in a girl fight. And again, it might last 40 seconds. And in that 40 seconds, they both might have got in 3 or 4 blows and a hair pull and a scratch and a calling each other something that, hey, not wasn't a term of endearment. But again, they were different. They were on a different level. They were probably a little more rare too. And they came around less frequently, and that's why you appreciated them so much.
I totally agree. And it is so funny. You're right. Because when you look back at the guy fights, it was much more, it was almost like, you're right. It's almost like a boxing match or a UFC fight is today. You're absolutely correct, because some of them, they went kind of long and it was a full-on fight, and definitely you didn't know who was going to win. But most of them, I would argue, were very disappointing, right? It's really just two guys circling each other. You started it. Well, you started it. No, you go. You throw the first punch, man. You throw the first punch. And what you could really see was, most of the time, Chris is absolutely right, it's two guys that really were really pushed into it.
Right.
Mostly by their friends and
Yes.
by peers who desperately wanted to create a Coliseum event with two gladiators. And usually the participants were just like reluctant at that point. Whatever it was they were pissed about was no longer even an issue. And they're both just like, how can we get out of this? Right. So
Wholly unsatisfying.
Yeah.
Whereas a girl fight,
Yeah.
again, it was fast, it was furious, and it was almost 100% worth it. And again, I don't know what that says about me or you back then. I'm sure there may be somebody out there listening, thinking, questioning our perspective.
Right.
But hey,
No doubt there.
and again, our perspectives change. And again, I don't know. I don't ever watch. I don't watch UFC or anything like that.
Right.
I do know that women do it, just like women box. And again, it's probably the same thing.
Well, you had such a good point in that. I think the emotions and the anger and the this, it was much more visceral and much more honest and sincere with women, where they're not going to wait around to stage this thing. We're not going to do this at 4:00 by the bike racks.
Mhm.
I'm pissed at you right now. This is happening right now. So you're right, Chris. If there was a girl fight, it was definitely something that you had to be in proximity of, or you were probably going to miss it, right? Because
Right.
all that energy was going to be expended now, not at 3:00, right? And
Right.
the other thing about, at least in guys' minds, you guys, the girls had a lot more potential weapons at their disposal, right? Because you had hair that you can pull.
Yes.
You definitely potentially had nails.
You could scratch.
Right, that guys didn't have. And let's not forget, the jewelry. Right? There's going to be a necklace you can yank on. By God, the age-old earring. Oh,
a ring you can punch somebody with.
Oh,
maybe.
the ring, the earrings. Oh man, don't even start me on the earrings. So, now for those of you that think that we're horrible people for talking about this, in every single situation, it was a skirmish. Nobody ever got seriously hurt. I mean, maybe with the guys, somebody might have broke a nose or something, but
bloody nose.
We are not talking about people literally murdering each other.
Right. And at the same time, I think it shows those two girls that were fighting wanted to fight. They weren't, caving into peer pressure. They weren't talked into it. If they didn't want to fight, they wouldn't fight. Whereas the boys felt they were compelled to fight. They were getting questioned if they didn't fight. So again, right. That whole girls mature faster than boys.
Yeah.
Hey, you saw that right there because these girls, made a decision on their own.
They don't play, man.
Yeah.
They do not
and
play.
It's like, I'm doing this
That's
because I want to do it, not because my friends are telling me I had to do it because of some indiscretion at gym class.
I'd like to bring in one more interesting dynamic into the school fight, which is what I like to call the underdog, the surprise match, where you had somebody who, in the guy world, appeared to be pretty formidable, right? Either they were muscular or they were one of those dudes that matured very early and already had hair under his armpits when he was 6 years old.
Right.
And everybody just thought of as undefeatable.
Muscle
and
tone.
Occasionally one of those guys would stumble across a wiry, super angsty,
scrappy,
insane nerd who would absolutely just surprise the crowd and suddenly turn into a frickin' tornado, a furious, ball of fists that would completely shock and stun the Goliath, right? And those were always so interesting when one of those guys would connect early on in the fight, and the dude that was supposed to be, that everyone assumed was going to win, ended up kind of having to back down, or in one case, I noticed even cry and go home. So, and I think the same goes for the girl fights, which would be a lot of times you had, I guess, what would be considered the tough girls that ran in certain circles, and maybe I don't know what made them so tough, but they were kind of the mean girls or the tough girls. And then, man, every once in a while they would pick on someone who was a little bit quiet, introverted, a little mousy, and big effing mistake.
Big mistake.
Big mistake. But a lot of the fights seem to have started usually with some kind of an incident that took place in gym class, right?
Overall, gym class was, at least at the beginning, right, was somewhat traumatizing. And I know we talked a couple episodes back, like, going to 6th grade camp and that sort of trauma of like having to change clothes or take showers or share bathrooms with your friends, but also total strangers.
Yeah.
But that was for a week, right? And there was a lot of ways to work around that. But one of the things, again, you're starting gym class and the trauma of you're going to have to change a couple times, right? Because you had to change into your gym clothes, and then you had to go have, go play out on the field, or do the 6-minute jog walk or any of these weird things, right? And then absolutely,
That's right.
And then you have to go back and get out of your gym clothes. And before you couldn't change, even though, let's face it, you probably weren't that sweaty. How bad could it be? You had to change. You had to take a shower. And again, in front of the rest of your class and other guys not in your class. And there was this structure. There was a kid who was in a cage, right? At least at our school. And he would basically be handing out towels.
Oh, that's right.
And that was one of his elective, was to be like, gym class monitor or whatever, which I always thought was a little bit bizarre when you think about it. So you have to go and pretend, you'd have to run, you'd have to go and pretend to shower, and then you have to get a towel. And the reason you had to do that is you had to get that towel because that was the only way you got out because the coach was waiting. You had to toss in your towel to get you. Now, again, they weren't watching your shower I don't think, and no one was, but you had to go in, pretend to shower, get yourself wet, get a towel, go change, and turn in the towel. And again, it was just traumatic for so many reasons. And I think, let's face it, we're all in different throes of puberty. It's like, you don't want to be naked in front of the other kids. I can always remember thinking, God, please, God, don't let me think of I don't know, Barbara Eden or Daisy Duke at the wrong time, because that's the last thing I need right now, because then your life would be over.
Yeah, it would be over. It would be over.
And so again, it was like I said, it was traumatic. Everything, gym class, at least at that time, at least the first couple of years, and to learn to get to be able to do that, and to have to change, and to have to shower, and then to have to change again. It was something that, let's face it, is a little bit strange.
It's just it's such a weird policy that they came up with. Somebody said on the school board, these kids are going to get sweaty enough that they have to shower, and mandatory. We can't have smelly kids in third or fourth period. It's just, we can't have that. So we need these kids to all get naked in front of each other and take showers. And again, you guys may think that we're making too big a deal out of it, but seriously, man, for Chris and I, sixth grade was the end of elementary school or grade school back then. And seventh grade was the beginning of what we call back then junior high school.
Not middle school.
Right. And I think we middle school or something now. But I remember, Chris, the summer after graduating from sixth grade, I was so psychologically traumatized thinking that I'm going to have to get naked in front of a bunch of dudes. And it was really nothing more than just, when have I ever done that before? That's very strange. And this is going to be horrible. And I just kept thinking, why are they making us get naked in front of other people? It just makes no sense. But that's what they did. That's what happened. And everyone, once you experienced it for the first time, having to shower in front of a bunch of dudes, the one thing that I guess was kind of cool and comforting about it was you instantly saw the expression on everyone else's face and knew that they were all thinking the exact same thing. Everybody was uncomfortable. Nobody wanted to be in there. And everybody was like, Jesus Christ, just get me out of here as quick as I can and give me my towel so I can get the F out of here. At least that's my impression.
It's almost like, could there have been a more inopportune time to have to start doing this, right? If you're at that age,
Totally.
if you're a younger kid, maybe you don't think about this kind of thing, right? Little kids don't have that sort of insecurity. They don't have those concerns. They don't seem to think of it as one way or another, right? But you're at that point in time now, when you're concerned about everything else, oh, guess what? Let's go to gym class and let's shower in between.
And by the way, you might compare this to something like later in adult life, going into a gym and showering at the gym in front of other dudes. Like, who cares? Why does that matter? But let's take it for what it is. At the gym, you're not then going to sit in a classroom for 2 hours with those guys and compete for the same affections of the women that are at the school and live with them at the same, high school or middle school indefinitely for the next 7 or 8 years of your life, right? These are people you're never going to see again. And to Chris's point, to say that people's bodies were at various stages of development was an understatement, right? You had people that still had bodies where they were very underdeveloped, to put it kindly. And then other dudes, as I mentioned before, that looked like they're already 37 years old, right? They already had all the stuff you need. And it was just such an unfair dichotomy of, whatever. It just seemed weird.
It's like, hey, kids, we know you're insecure. We know you have low self-esteem. We know you're trying to
now
find your way, and become a young adult. But hey, you're going to have to do this first. So it just seemed, and again, you talk about the gyms now, those people are there voluntarily. We were not there, right? So we were, so again, that's where it just became, just something that you chalk it up. We laugh now, but it's still pretty fresh in my memory because all the details we share, but so many of those different things about that era, because the gym itself, and it wasn't even really a gym, right? There was actually, in that case, there really are no gyms. It's called gym class. But essentially, everything about that era, classrooms and technology, if you got a class in an actual classroom, you scored, as opposed to having a classroom in this sort of portable, boxy aluminum trailer.
Oh, and by the way, let's not underscore that. Back then, you guys, schools very oftentimes didn't even have buildings. When a school wanted to expand or they had more students, they wouldn't build another structure. God, no. They would just bring in these white trailer trash bungalows that came from God knows where, probably a nuclear war test that was, they're probably from like Nevada atomic tests, and they brought them in on a trailer. Anyway, yeah, we went into bungalows. You literally felt like, I don't know. You felt like almost felt like you were in a camp of some kind, like a prisoner camp.
And, the first day of school, when you got your schedule and you saw, room 103 and room 206, it's like, damn it, B8. My math class is in a bungalow, right? And so again, there's no heat.
No.
There's no air conditioning. Everything. So, so you'd sweat or you'd shiver. There was something about it that felt, a little bit. And again, the safety standards, I don't know what kind of, safeguards a bungalow had, how easily collapsible it would have been in the event.
Oh my God. Collapsible. That's an understatement.
The escape route was this one little door down through, a few steps. And it was just the most, and so again, if you had more than one or two classes in a bungalow.
The bungalow, yeah.
Again, that was junior high. I remember though in elementary school you're in a bungalow, again, having a bungalow for the entire year.
Plus the bungalow was usually a trek of some kind too. Like you had to go out there to the bungalow.
It was on the perimeter of the campus.
And I'm sorry, was the bungalow on cement pads or next to a bunch of greenery and flowers and landscaping? No, it was on decomposed granite, dirt, right? And every time you walked in, what hit you in the face? The overwhelming smell of mold, sweat, and fear. That's all it was. It just smacked you. You're just like, God, that is the worst.
Mixed together. And like you said, out there on the dirt, I remember back and forth, going back and forth, and maybe he's like, why are my zips so dirty? It's because I had to walk to a bungalow from an actual.
I'm sorry, did you say your zips?
My zips.
What are zips again?
Zips were like, they were shoe had a little Z instead of a stripe. They had and you got them from like Thom MCan or Kinney shoes or something like that. Prior to when you could actually get into that next level of your first pair of Nikes. Now I had zips.
Wow.
For I don't know how long.
Zips.
And that was just kind of a thing.
That is a
dirty zips.
Deep cut, Chris. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
The zips. Yeah, bungalows, man. Absolutely just the worst.
Bungalows were not exactly, again, because, right, and we all remember, they were very low tech at their core, right? So again, what do we have? All the technology, again, back those, when we watched a film, right? And we watched an actual film. Right, where you had to haul a projector, go to the AV room, and then again, I think remember getting those projectors up the steps of a bungalow, these big carts, right, and then you'd get in there and you'd have these giant spools of film,
reels,
so some reels, and you'd have to thread it like you were a freaking projectionist.
You were a projectionist.
Well,
what do you mean you were a projectionist? You were a projectionist.
Just to watch Johnny Tremain or something like that. And I think in the sense when you look at it, where now it's like, and it was an ordeal just to watch a film.
You're killing me. Between Zips and Johnny Tremain, you just blew out a section of my brain that I haven't activated in... Oh my God, Johnny Tremain. Right. Oh yeah, that was a classic.
Right. So again, the projectors, the film strips, right?
Yeah. Oh sure.
The overhead projectors. It's a miracle we learned anything in the sense because
what did we learn though? Look back at those films we saw. So random. I don't understand the learning value of anything that they showed us back then. It was such a random hodgepodge of weirdness, right? I'm Joe's heart.
Right.
Or just, I don't know. It just seems so strange that it was obviously mostly the teachers just like, F this, I'm taking a break today. Right. I mean, that's
exactly
right.
And especially if you had a substitute or a sub.
Oh God.
And if you had a sub and if you weren't changing, desks with your friends. So I'm Jeff and he's Chris. Well, because boy, we were really funny that way.
Right. Sure.
So you're changing desks or changing names with your friend. And we got a sub, which means we're not doing anything.
Sub was the greatest thing of all. We were all excited because,
yes, we got a sub. Yeah. I didn't, I didn't do my homework. Of course, they're probably still going to collect it or something.
Chris, how many times did you get that great feeling when you had a test that you hadn't studied for?
Mm-hmm.
You were super nervous about, if you cared about your grades, which Chris and I both did, by the way. Look where it got us.
Yeah.
But you come in, you're super nervous because you haven't studied, or you got to turn homework in, or you have a report due and you didn't do it. And then you get in, the teacher's not there, and there's a sub. You're like, oh, sweet Jesus, thank God it's a sub. It's that same feeling when you wake up on Saturday morning and you think you got to get up and go to school, and you realize you can go back to bed. It's that same feeling of, oh, my God, thank you, Lord.
Right. And the sub, yeah, exactly. Not have the assignment, not have the test, unless it was a spelling test. I could always bullshit my way through a spelling test on the skinny piece. Remember, it was for some reason a spelling test was on that skinny piece of paper.
You look like you were writing it on a receipt.
Right. It was, it's like, why did spelling tests? Because they're trying to conserve. I don't understand why spelling tests have their own sort of paper, because probably in the grand scheme of things, it probably took just as much to produce skinny paper as it did the regular paper.
And you hit on a point that was so funny earlier about having to take this giant metal cart that had this extremely heavy film projector on it.
Probably expensive and valuable.
And the only people that were AV technicians or monitors, these were students, you guys.
Right.
It wasn't like some technician came in and hauled it up the stairs and ran it. No, it was always the nerdiest, dorkiest, geekiest of the kids, myself included.
No one could see me waving my hand.
Myself included, yeah. But that would own this and take care of this as their responsibility. And the reason I'm laughing is because I don't recall there ever being a ramp for disabled students that led into a bungalow. In fact, I can't even think how they got in. It would going back to our Ironside conversation, right? How did they even get in? Was there ever a ramp?
Did they go to school with us? I don't think they did. I don't think they had. Again, they were singled out and ostracized because they,
You guys, he's not wrong. I don't remember very many I can't think of one disabled student.
Right.
That's so weird.
I can remember a couple that had sort of little hitches but they didn't,
all of us had issues
without naming names.
Come on.
But they weren't full on, the schools didn't have to be ADA compliant or anything like that.
That is so true.
Or maybe they wouldn't, maybe they didn't, maybe if they did have a kid no, I don't remember that.
They also probably realized, especially again, I'm talking about the 70s, that kids were pretty damn brutal, you guys, back then. Political correctness, pretty much non-existent. And if you were different in any way, shape, or form, if you made the mistake of wearing the wrong shoes, the wrong shirt,
zips,
the wrong haircut, you effed up and you tried to be stylish that day, and it just, man, would that go south quickly. Boy, people would just, they would just jump on it like piranha.
And they would remember it forever.
Forever.
It would follow you.
That's right.
There was a girl I remember who for some reason, shaved off her eyebrows. And
okay, well, hold on a second. That is a bit extreme.
Right. She shaved them off herself. No one held her down and shaved off her eyebrows, I don't think.
Okay.
She shaved off her eyebrows when we were in third grade, and in seventh grade, they still hadn't grown back.
Right.
Okay. So it's just and you remember that kind of stuff. There was a girl who, again, who was really sunburned one time when we were out there playing volley tennis.
Yeah.
And she ripped off this big piece of skin on her forearm, and everybody was and we were still talking about it in 11th grade. That's how we remembered her, because it was just, so those things, everybody had really long memories for the worst things.
I do to this day remember a kid that, for whatever reason, did away with his own eyelashes. I'm not sure how that happened.
Ouch.
But anyway, it was very odd. And you're right, that to this day, I still can see that eyelashless stare on his face.
I can see the kid who turned his eyelids inside out.
Oh, God.
Again, which was a neat 70s
By the way,
trick,
that was something I never attempted, but that was a big deal back then, guys. If you could turn your eyelid inside out and for just a couple of brief moments, show everybody the inside of your eyelid as you're walking around, that was considered pretty high end.
Right. Well, so many things, again, were traumatic about that time. And because in retrospect, there wasn't a lot of supervision outside of the teachers.
Of supervision.
So you could get away, if you're on the field, you could get away with a lot. Right. And I think And except at lunchtime when the yard duties were kind of rolling around.
Oh,
they had
my
their
God.
clipboards and maybe they had a
No,
whistle and something.
no.
They didn't command a lot of respect. They're always somebody's mom or somebody volunteer. I don't know why you would volunteer for that.
You guys, once again, if you go back to these schools that Chris and I grew up in, it's mostly dirt granite fields, very little landscaping, these bungalows that, again, were more like bunkers. And yard duty, to Chris's excellent point, was typically a mom that volunteered. But what were they? They would go around like a damn German prison guard, right? And they had a clipboard in their hand, and they were constantly making notes, like they were reporting people, and they were observing and reporting. And it felt very strange. It did. It felt at times like you were in a minimum security prison setting, or juvenile hall or something.
Maybe the key word here is yard duty. There was no yard.
Yard duty.
Maybe there was no yard. There was no lawn.
But that was their name. Yard duties,
right.
Yeah.
But then again, there was a yard like just as like a prison yard, right? Maybe that's what like Folsom Prison was like, or Shawshank. I don't know. And they say something that happened out in the yard. Maybe that's where they got it. And again, with all due respect to them, it was a pretty thankless job because all they got was like a lot of lit from some kids that weren't theirs, right? They weren't teachers, so they didn't have that same level of where maybe they could write a name down. They didn't even know that kid, right? And in the sense, it's like they were there to maybe make sure that nobody killed each other or no girl fights broke out, because the boy fights weren't going to be, after school and the yard duty were long gone. But it's like they were there to ensure that nobody set something on fire. I don't know what else they were supposed to do.
But Chris, I can't even count how many times that me and my friends were kind of up to quote unquote no good during recess. And it felt a lot like Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. We had lookouts. You tell me when the yard duty isn't looking so that I don't know what we were doing, digging tunnels out of the school.
Fighting, maybe.
I have no idea.
I didn't get in trouble for having a pencil fight.
Pencil fighting. Okay, let's go into that for a second. Pencil fighting, the most harmless activity on the planet. Chris, it escalated to such a level that they finally banned it, and we still to this day don't know what the drama was. So, Chris, explain to everybody what a pencil fight is.
Pencil fighting, and for most of us at the time, the cool pencils were the NFL pencils that you could get from the machine or the student store.
Okay, so we had these vending machines.
Right, and these pencils, and they were, and first thing about the first rule of a pencil fight is that had to be it wasn't a sharpened pencil.
It's like Fight Club.
It's like Fight
Rule
Club.
number one.
Rule number one. Had to be a pristine pencil, was not sharpened. It had to have a flat edge. It was brand new. And essentially you would hold it between your index, between your two fingers. You make peace signs, and hold it between your fingers on both hands.
Yeah.
And essentially, I would hold my pencil out in front of Jeff.
Offered
this
up.
is not a euphemism.
Yeah.
Hold the pen, and where Jeff would come up with hold his pencil, mine's horizontal. He would hold his vertically and pull it back to get a little bit of tension, snap it down, and try to break my pencil.
I'm just trying to snap his pencil in half, and he's offering it up to me, which is the rule, right? You have to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And then essentially, if my pencil doesn't break, then it's reversed. Jeff holds his that way.
So the rules are very simple.
Right. The rules are very simple, back and forth, maybe essentially, and I don't know. I don't think, and maybe it lasted 2 or 3 of those.
Yeah.
They weren't long.
No.
They were like, definitely, they were longer maybe sometimes than a girl fight, but much shorter than a boy fight.
I really loved when two people that were really shitty at pencil fighting would get into a fight, because it could last 10 minutes and you would just see wood chip after wood chip after wood chip. And then it got really interesting. It's like, come on, man, who's going to win? I mean, people were almost taking bets when it lasted more than 5 minutes.
So you'd gather around and watch a pencil fight like you were watching a real fight. And then eventually somebody would win.
Yeah.
And then that would, a yard duty would come and break it up. No prize. It was just sort of like pride. And the funny part is, I can remember going, this is a good pencil. So this is my pencil fighting. Because it was just like, so far it was, undefeated. It was 3-0. Right. And there was something about this pencil. But when, in retrospect, we bought those pencils. We own those pencils.
Our pencils.
We didn't take them out of, the supply closet.
We didn't steal them.
We didn't steal them.
That's right.
But it was bad. We were just entertaining ourselves. And again, would you rather have me doing something else?
You guys, to say that the yard duties eventually caught on is an understatement. Once those yard duties caught on to the fact that people were, God forbid, fighting with pencils, they shut that down real quick.
Right.
We won't have that on these grounds.
There was
right?
like memos, and announcements and everything else.
They never could give us a reason.
Right.
And I remember the big scandal, Chris, at our personal junior high school, which was Pershing Junior High School in down there in San Diego and San Carlos, was we caught a guy. He was the best pencil fighter there was, and guess what he did, Chris? How did he cheat? His pencil
had rubber cement on it.
No, it wasn't a pencil at all.
Okay,
it was just a piece of goddamn metal that he had painted to look like a pencil.
That I don't remember.
The backlash.
That is a deep pull.
The backlash on that scandal, you guys, I can't even tell you. And really, what was the damage? A bunch of pencils.
Right.
But the pride that he had stolen from us after killing us in all those fights, man, he was ostracized.
It was like
time.
He had corked his bat or something like that, right? Or he had put Vaseline on the ball before he threw it. Right?
Exactly.
Cheating at pencil fighting.
All right. Well, looks like it's that time again. Another great episode. Holy moly, my brain is literally tired from all of those polls and all of those memories just bleeding back into my conscious. So
it's a good tired.
It is a good kind of tired. So, Chris, what do you think? Next time?
Next time.
See you guys soon on the next episode.